Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Ram Krishna Hare 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 Ram Krishna Hare 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 Krishna Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram.
Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. Always Sri Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj. Hemangi Mati, whenever you're ready, you can start with prayers, Mati.
Okay, Prabhuji, thank you. Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Sri Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj. Today we are reading Canto 2, Chapter 2, text 26 to 37. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudire Nashtaprayesu Apatresu Nityam Bhagavat Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Soke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. At the time of the final devastation of the complete universe, the end of the duration of Brahma's life, a flame of fire emanates from the mouth of Ananta, from the bottom of the universe. The yogi sees all the planets of the universe burning to ashes, and thus he lives for Satyaloka by airplane used by the great purified souls. The duration of life in Satyaloka is calculated to be 15,480,000,000 years. In the planet of Satyaloka, there is neither bereavement, nor old age, nor death. There is no pain of any kind, and therefore there are no anxiety save the times due to consciousness. There is a feeling of compassion for those unaware of the process of devotional service, who are subjected to unsuppressible miseries in the material world. After reaching Satyaloka, the devotee is specifically able to be incorporated fearlessly by the subtle body in an identity similar to that of the gross body. And one after another, he gradually attains stages of existence from earthly to watery, fiery, glowing, and airy until he reaches the ethereal stage. The devotee thus surpasses the subtle object of different senses like aroma by smelling, the palate by tasting, vision by seeing forms, touch by contacting, the vibration of the ear by ethereal identification, and the sense organs by material activities. The devotee thus surpasses the gross and the subtle forms of covering, enters the plane of egoism, and in that status, he merges the material modes of nature, ignorance, and passion. In this point of neutralization, and thus reaches egoism is goodness. After this, all egoism is merged in the Mahatattva, and he comes to the point of pure self-realization. Only the purified soul can attain the perfection of associating with the personality of Godhead in complete bliss and satisfaction in his constitutional state. Whoever is able to renovate such devotional perfection is never again attracted by this material world, and he never returns. Your Majesty, Maharaj Parikshit, know that all that I have described in reply to your proper inquiry is just according to the version of the Veda, and it is eternal truth. This was described personally by Lord Krishna unto Brahma, with whom the Lord was satisfied upon being properly worshipped. For those who were wandering in the material universe, there is no more auspicious means of deliverance than what is aimed at in the direct devotional service of the Lord Krishna. The great personality Brahma, with great attention and concentration of the mind, studied the Vedas 3 times, and after scrutinizingly examined them, he ascertained that attraction for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is the highest perfection of religion. The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, is in every living being along with the individual soul. And this fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence. O King, it is therefore essential that every human being hear about, glorify, and remember the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, always and everywhere. Those who drink through oral reception, fully filled with the nectarian message of Lord Krishna, the beloved of the devotees, purify the polluted aim of life known as material enjoyment, and thus go back to Godhead, to the lotus feet of Him, the personality of Godhead. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mataji. Yeah, Sundaracala Prabhuji, whenever you're ready, you can start, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay.
Thank you, Mataji, for reading the verses. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2. The Lord in the Heart. So we are going to cover today from the concept from verse 22, because it's a continuation from verse 22 with a brief prayer. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshadhari Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavanda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So topic from verse 22 to 32. It is explained how a Virat Roop meditating yogi achieves the liberation. So the verse, it's a very nice, informative verse from verse 22. I'll just recite one or two. Yedi prayasam rupa parameshthyam vaihayasanam utayad viharam ashtadhipachyam gunasannibhaye sahaiva gachen manasendriyaisya. So this verse is explaining the Paramatma meditating yogi is free of all desires, but he gives up generally in comparison. He gives up subtle body and goes to Brahma Jyoti. Whereas this Virat meditating yogi as described in this verse, because he still has traces of desires to enjoy, when he leaves the body, he travels along with his subtle body, his senses, and he will not go without them. So because if the subtle body is gone, how will he enjoy? So in third canto, there is a connection there. It is explained by Kapaladev. He describes one situation where during Mahapralaya, so Brahmaji's death, after he finishes his 311 trillion years of his life. All souls who are not yet completely ready for liberation, what happens is they go and merge into the body of Karanodaka Sai Vishnu. And they are forced to strip off their gross and subtle bodies also. So Kapaladev describes about one such jiva who is not yet free of desires, who is thinking, he is forcibly given self-realization actually. So Kapaladev describes when the jiva wakes up, he says, "Oh, I am dead. I am dead." But eventually he realizes, if I am dead, how am I thinking? I am not dead. Till now I am identifying with gross and subtle body. But now I realize I am the soul. So that realization, which gives great bliss to the yogi who endeavors for it, the same self-realization is giving great distress to this soul. So what this soul is thinking, my God, unfortunately, I am not given the gross and subtle body. I am filled with so many desires, but no capacity to fulfill any of them. So he is in great misery actually. So we might say sometimes, why Supreme Lord is so cruel? He given me this gross and subtle body and is he's put me into this bewildering condition. But actually, it is not, because Jiva becomes, although miserable, and he has all those desires in his heart. So he has no vehicle to fulfill those desires. So he patiently waits for the creation to happen. That's how Kapil Dev describes. So it's actually greater mercy Krishna is giving gross and subtle bodies so that Jiva is not frustrated in his endeavors. That's why this yogi has to have his material and subtle body. He cannot give up because he needed it later when he goes to the appropriate time. So, but it is not case for the person whose goal is only to enjoy. In comparison, a karmi, a full-fledged karmi, who is simply into enjoyment, we cannot compare this yogi with him, because his objective is very clear. I need to get liberated. Whereas karmi yogi, he doesn't have such purifying objectives. Like for example, if a person is traveling in a train, the same person might be looking for bhaji, peanuts. Why not have some enjoyable time when I am trying to travel? Anyway, I'm doing nothing. So he's distracted. Though he's distracted with this planet, that planet, this Ashtanga, this Virat Roop meditator, though he is distracted with this planet and that planet in his journey, his goal is very clear. He will reach the destination. So to experience for some time, eventually he attains some, the same liberation, but for after a very long time. Eventually, what happens is this meditator, this Virat Roop meditator, he gets full self-realization, God realization. At that point, he will think after a long time, why had I had all these desires? I would have achieved this liberation very early. So he will actually regret at a later point. So this Virat Roop meditator is not an outright enjoyer. Similarly, at sadhaka stage also, if we compare, it's never been a black and white where we have a Paramahamsas who are completely liberated and karmis who are exclusive enjoyers. So sadhaka stage, our goal might be to achieve a love of God, but in between we may have other desires also to that haunt us due to natural tendency. But Vedas, they acknowledge this situation because they understand that it is never a black and white situation. So there is never going to be outright karmis or exclusive pure devotees all the times. So there will always be people in between. So Vedas acknowledging such devotees, it provides such paths called Achiraga Marga or Krama Mukti, as explained in verse 22 to 32. So this Krama Mukti is a step-by-step gradual mukti. And there are Vaishnava Sampradayas who have exclusive writings on this topic. Vaishnava Sampradaya, like Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, it is very much stressed in their writings. So because Sampradaya has to accommodate people who have tendency to enjoy at the same time want to get liberated. So these Virat Roop meditating yogis, they have tinges of other desires also, though ultimate objective is liberation only. So it is explained, such a person actually travels along with the material body because he will need it till he eventually achieves liberation. So he carries it with him. And if we see 8th chapter also, it is described in Bhagavad Gita by Krishna. Agnir Jyotir Ahas Shuklaha Sanmasha Uttarayanam Tatta Prayata Gachanti Brahma Vido Janaha. So Brahma Vido Janaha, the knowers of Brahman, they would like to depart on the path of light. And planet of Archi, starting from that planet, so that planet, they go all the way to Brahmaloka, and the Brahmaloka is 13th stop. In between, there are 11 other stops. So yogi travels through this path, eventually achieves liberation progressively. So as each stop of these planets, progressively these planets are subtler and subtler. Enjoyment is subtler and subtler, and if you can see the enjoyment tendency goes from grossest condition to the subtlest by the time they reach the Brahma Loka. Our Chi planet is also called Vaishwanara Loka. So Bhagavad Gita, it is explained Vaishwanaro Pachami Aham Chaturvidam, like that, Vaishwanaro fire. It is explained in Bhagavad Gita by Krishna that I am digestive fire. So there is the Archi planet, which is also called Vaishwanara Loka, is actually a first stop where it is a planet made of fire predominantly, and it is at the level of Swarga. So he goes there, enjoys there. So he says, sufficient, I am satisfied now. So he gives up there. He gives up that planet and goes to the next one. My destination is liberation. What he thinks is, my destination is liberation. I have to go. Like that he thinks and goes. Still more subtler like that, he goes to until Brahmaloka. He keeps traveling. So it's mentioned by Krishna in one of the Puranas. I myself put him, this person who is endeavorer, I myself put him on Garuda, take him to my abode without the need for the path of Archiragi, without needing. So for such pure devotees, Krishna says, Aham Tesham Aham Samudharta Mrityu Samsara Sagarat Bhavami Nachirat Partha. So for pure devotee, I will personally come and pick him up from Bhavasagar and take him back to Godhead. So it is clarified, Virat Rup meditator is not a ordinary person where he's simply going there by karma. Here in verse 23, you can see his qualifications. These yogis have Pavana Antaratmana, have, and bodies made of air. They travel very easily. But these people don't go to such places because of karma. This is a clear distinction. Virat Rup meditator, though he is a Virat Rup meditator, you might have heard this verse of Abrahma Bhavana Lokal Punaravartin Arjuna Mamupechatu Kaunteya Punarjanmana Vijyate. So that what is described in that verse is that a person will fall down, and it is highlighted there. It's a karmi who is endeavoring for higher destinations. That is what is described in that verse. But whereas here, even if one may go till Brahmaloka, he has to come back once his karma is over or pious credit is gone. But this pious person goes to all these places, and he is not eventually kicked out from these places. He has gone there having a qualification of Vijja of Supreme Lord, Tapo by following Varnashrama Dharma, Yoga, which was endeavored by Ashtanga Yoga, and Samadhi Bhajan by Jnana practice. This is his currency. Karma is not his currency. So whenever they want to leave, they can leave. So in text 24 to 26, coming to today's topic, so Vaishwanara, Sushumara, Maharloka, Brahmaloka, 4 lokas are mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. But in actual, there are 13, as we discussed a couple of minutes ago. Not all destinations are mentioned actually. But when he travels from one loka to another, he becomes more purified, subtler and subtler anarthas and desires. So Maharloka is right above Swargaloka. During the night of Brahma, everything till Swarga gets burned by fire emanating from Ananta Sesh. So what happens is, this yogi experiences heat because he was in Maharloka, just a floor above. He thinks enough of staying here. So then he goes to Janaloka, Tapaloka, and then Satyaloka. That's the way it's described. In 27th verse, he reaches Brahmaloka, final destination, in the purification process. In the nature of the Brahmaloka is described. What is the situation of that yogi who has reached Brahmaloka is described. na yatra shoko na jara na mrutyur नार्ते न चोद्वेग रुते कुतश्चित् यच्चित्ततोधा कृपया निधं विधाम दुरंत दुःखा प्रभवानुदर्शनात्. So, what is the nature of Brahmaloka is described here. Na shoko, na jara, na mrutyur. There are no lamentations, there is no death, no old age. But of course, we know that there is death there also. But what it means is that the duration is so long compared to our earthly realm. So, na artir, na cha udvega, no suffering, fear or anxiety. So, rute kutaschit adha krupaya. This is the condition it is explained. Except sometimes when these residents of Brahmaloka look at the people of Bhuvar Loka, etc., they see suffering. They become compassionate. Duranta dukkha prabhavanu darshanat. When they see insurmountable suffering, their hearts cries in compassion actually. This is the only suffering that they endure when they reach that planet. While in Brahmaloka, he has two options. He can choose to stay till it is time for Brahmaji's wind up his pastimes and achieve liberation after Brahmaji leaves with, he leaves along with Brahmaji. Or another option is, if he may desire to leave before that, this Virat Roop meditator, now I have experienced sufficiently, now let me go to the goal of liberation. Then he takes this path which is described in verse 28 to 32. So, tato vishesham pratipajya nirbhayas tenatmanapo anala mrutyur atvaran jyotirmayo vayumupecha kale vayavatmanakham bruhad atmalingam. So, then covering this universe, we have 8 layers: earth, water, fire, air, ether, false ego, Mahatattva, and Pradhan. So after leaving Brahmaloka, he reaches layer of earth, where he gets earthly body, so that he perfectly enjoys the sense of smell there. So Krishna says, Punyo Ganda Prutivyamscha. He enjoys it, thinks enough is enough. I don't want to enjoy any more of this sense gratification. So he gives up the desire to enjoy. He gives up the body and he gets a body made of water. And he enjoys the sense of taste. And after that, he gives up the body and desire and goes to the next layer, the layer of fire, where he enjoys the sense of form. He gives up that body and he takes up the body made of, layer. He dwells in the layer of air. He enjoys the sense of touch and he gives up that body also. So comes to the layer of ether, enjoys the sense of sound, gives up that body also. Now he is sufficiently purified. Now he still has some material mind, material senses, material intelligence, all of which he received from Ahankar, false ego. So what happens is, the creation process is described in Karanadaka Sai Vishnu. When he glances, he impregnates Prakriti, the Pradhan, and the Pradhan becomes agitated, and it becomes Mahatattva. So Mahatattva, further agitated by glance of our Supreme Lord, transforms into Ahankar. And Ahankar has actually 3 things: Satvik Ahankar, Rajas Ahankar, Tamasik Ahankar. So from Satvik Ahankar, this Jiva who received his material, his mind, and sense devatas, and he has sense perception and all these things that he needed. So he received all this from Satvik Ahankar. And this Jiva who received intelligence, Karmendriyas, Jnanendriyas, and Prana from the Rajashik Ahankar. And from Tamasika, just Prana means life air, and Karmendriyas and Jnanendriyas are senses, both the senses that we need to experience the knowledge, gain the knowledge, and experience that we need to, move and all. And there are And from tamasic ahankar, every jiva actually receives these 5 elements. So earth, bhumi, rapo, analo, vayu. So earth, water, fire, ether, and all that, and false ego. And also he receives 5 tanmatras, right? And he receives these tanmatras from tamasic ahankar. What are those tanmatras? Rupa, rasa, gandha, sparsha, shabda, those kind of things. Form, taste, these kind of things. So these 5 tanmatras also he receives from tamasic ahankar. When this living entity is going back, he does exactly the opposite. Before he gets liberated, he does exactly the opposite. So Rajashik Ahankar, oh Rajashik Ahankar, you take back my intelligence. This Virat Rup meditator, by the time he reaches that purification level, he says, you take back my intelligence and karma indriyas. I don't need it anymore. Oh Tamasik Ahankar, you take my 5 elements and 5 tanmatras. Like that, he deposits everything. Like that, he deposits Ahankar into Mahattattva, Mahattattva into Pradhana, and then merges into Brahmajyoti. This is described in verse 28 to 31. So in verse 32, Sukadevi Goswami says, Ete shruti te nrupa veda gite tvayabhiprushte cha sanatanai cha evai pura brahmana hatushta aradhito bhagavan vasudeva. He says, my dear Parikshit Maharaj, these 2 parts suggest that I have spoken to you. I have not spoken to you by speculation. Previously, when Brahmaji pleased Vasudeva, the Supreme Lord requested him to speak on liberation, both the direct path and gradual path. So at that time, Supreme Lord, being pleased with him, spoke these paths before. Therefore, there is a praman. And I'm not speaking from my own speculation, he's saying, Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, if you see Prabhupada purports also, it is very rare to say where Prabhupada is not quoting from Praman. Either it is direct in initial part of the first canto. He intentionally didn't quote many verses because to gradually elevate a reader to there. But actually, if you see, even the paraphrases he wrote are actually exactly direct translations of the verses from some Shastra. Similarly, he will make a statement, quote couple of verses, if you hear his classes, to establish Praman. Similarly, if you see Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, our Acharyas, or any of our Acharyas' writings, what I heard is bulk, for example, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is a bulky book. The 19 chapters which are part of Bhakti Shastri course. If you just take statements of Rupa Goswami, the whole of 19 chapters can be summarized in one paper. Page 1, page 2, on both sides. So if it's very content-wise, it is small only. But every statement he makes, he gives 10 to 15 pramanas from Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, Puranas, Upanishads to substantiate his point. Therefore, Rupa Goswami wrote Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which became so big and became voluminous. So that's how much emphasis our acharyas do to establish the Praman. Even Krishna quotes Pramans in his 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He speaks about Kshetra, Kshetrajna, right? And at that phase, he actually speaks a verse called Rushibhir Bahuda Gitam Chandobhir Vividhai Pruthak Brahma Sutra Padaischaiva Hetu Madhir Vinishchitaihi. My dear Arjuna, if you want further reference, more than what I have described, read about this subject matter, Rushibhir Bahuda Gitam, writings from various sages of Upanishads, and Chandobhir Vividhai Pruthak Vedic mantras, Brahma Sutra Padaischaiva. You can refer to Vedanta Sutras. This is how Sukadeva is also quoting some Pramana in this verse 32. But this was already spoken to Supreme Lord to Brahma long back. Prabhupada says in the purport, this shows proof that there is no difference between the authority of Vedas and Srimad Bhagavatam. This is very important actually. So truth is eternal. No erudite scholarship is needed to understand the Vedas. One just had to accept through parampara. A common man always accepts some authority. So, which is mostly science. A common man usually accepts authority called science. Therefore, here Prabhupada is saying, why not accept the authority of the Vedas? At least for the descriptions for which is beyond sky and universe. You can accept Vedas. What is within this universe? You may accept science. Scope of science is within this universe. Anyway, you are willing to accept authority, O common man, for the scope that is beyond the science. Why don't you accept authority of Vedas? Prabhupada is asking here. And from verses 33 to 37, the path of bhakti, the path of direct liberation, the path of gradual liberation. Now, Sukadeva Goswami, these are the three paths, right? Out of these three, what is the best path? Sukadeva Goswami is going to give his verdict here. Nahi yatho anyata shiva pantha vishatah samshuta viha vasudeve bhagavati bhakti yogo yato bhavet. Yato bhakti yato bhavet. Then that which gives rise to love of Godhead Vasudeva. Which means actually that which gives rise to prema. So sadhana bhakti is being referred here actually in this verse 33. Because sadhana bhakti is sadhana. So how do we know actually that it is sadhana bhakti which is mentioned here? So because by logic also, okay Prabhuji, let's say if someone asks us, if we are new to the Krishna conscious process, okay Prabhuji, from tomorrow onwards you practice prema bhakti. It's not so easy. It's not possible at all because we need purification for that. You can say from tomorrow you chant 16 rounds or start chanting, follow regulative principles, wake up early. As soon as you take up first darshan of the Lord in the morning, hair should stand up on the end and tears should be flowing from your eyes. If someone expects that from a neophyte devotee, it's very difficult. Those things are not imposed, usually. So bhava and prema are the goals of, are the goals, and it is bestowed by the mercy of the Lord, right, on the practitioner. Therefore, so this path Shuka is recommending here is a sadhana bhakti, Vaidhi sadhana, which gives lead to the prema. That's how it is concluded in this verse. One may say, you might have given wonderful presentation nicely. You described these two paths of liberation, path of bhakti also you explained. Now you have given your verdict. It's fine. We understand you have perfect knowledge of liberation bhakti, Sukadeva Goswami ji. But verdict you have given may be of your own personal opinion. People might say this because, for example, in Chapan Yog there are 56 items. If you give devotees to taste it, probability that each one come up with, if you ask them, tell me the 10 best things that you like, each might come up with 10 different items. It's very unlikely all of us say that's one item is the best. So because loko bhinna ruchi, everyone has a different taste. Therefore, in order to establish that it is not my personal opinion, Sukadeva Goswami gives a powerful proof in the next verse 34. So here it is explained. Bhagavan Brahma Katsneya Trir Aviksha Manishaya Tad Adhyavasyat Kutastho Ratir Atman Yato Bhavet. Brahma 3 times he reviewed with his whole body made of intelligence. We all know that Brahma's body is made of fully intelligence only. With that body, Brahma 3 times he reviewed and reviewed scrutinizingly and ascertained. Tad adhyavasyat, ascertained it. What did he ascertain? Kutastho ratir atman yato bhavet. That which gives rise to attraction of God. What is that? Sadhana bhakti. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakurji says, Kutastho Bhagavan Brahma refers to Lord Vishnu. Vishnu himself actually reviewed Vedas not once but 3 times, and came to conclusion that topmost path is that which gives rise to bhakti. So advices of Brahma and Vishnu can be taken very seriously. Which is advice is Ratir Atman Yatto Bhavet. That is the advice. So that path is the advice from Brahma and Vishnu. Now you explained about the so dear Sukadeva Goswami, you have explained us about the attraction to Supreme Personality of Godhead, but I don't see him. How do I understand that the presence of Supreme Lord? How do I understand? Like that people might ask. So he explained text 35. Bhagavan sarva bhuteshu lakshita sarvatmana harihi drishyair buddhi adibhir drishta lakshanair anumapakaihi. So anumapakaihi. He says, Lakshita, devotees see Bhagavan sarva bhuteshu, see. They see Bhagavan in all beings. And Swatmana harihi, by the mercy of Paramatma. Sarvasya chaham. Sudhi sannivishto matta smriti jnanam apohanam cha. Supreme Lord is a Supreme Lord in Paramatma feature. What he gives is knowledge, remembrance, and also forgetfulness. And devotees, by the help of Paramatma, can understand the Supreme Lord in all beings, in his Paramatma feature. But one may say, how do we understand the presence of Jivatma and Paramatma, right? That was the question. So I don't accept scriptures. People might generally say that, right? You tell me Supreme Lord exists, how he exists, how Jiva exists. Explain it to me by logic that the Jiva and Paramatma is there. So that's why it is explained in this verse. Drashta lakshanair anumapakaihi can be referred by the symptoms of observable intelligence. And Prabhupada says, when one sees someone in performing a nice activity, anyone, then if one carefully observes, he can know that someone who is using intelligence to perform this activity. This is number one point. He is using his intelligence to perform that nice activity. One can see that intelligence, mind are just instruments, and they themselves are not the doer if we pay close attention, right? Therefore, by observing the action of intelligence, one understands intelligent person who is the possessor of this intelligence. Like that, you can infer the presence of Jivatma by the action of intelligence. That is explained by Prabhupada in the purport. Then the second point, how do we understand that about Paramatma? How do we infer the presence? He says, Prabhupada says, it's very simple. If two people equally endured, put same effort, they don't get same results all time, right? Some people, if he put some effort, he would get a different result every time. Even if you're not comparing two people of same qualification, but even if you consider one person also, if he put same effort after some time at a different time, he could get different result also. This is observable by anyone. So this is the proof that there is a higher control. So 18.14 it is said, Atishtanam tatha karta kartam cham pruthak vidham vividhascha pruthak chesta daivam chaivatra panchamam. So Krishna described 5 causes of success of any activity, right? Adhishtanam, the body; karta, soul; karanam, which is subtle body; vividhascha pruthak chesta, that is nothing but different activities that we do; daivam, Paramatma. One may have similar 4 factors, similarly endowed. One may have similar body, similar intelligence, similar subtle body. One may put some same effort, but one may get a different result, and it is always observed. With that observation, one can understand that there must be some higher intelligence who is controlling the results. So inference, one can observe Paramatma also. One can refer, one cannot, Anuman is the inference method, right? It is mentioned in this verse, Anuman. Anuman also has its scope, limited scope. Cannot replace a Shabda. The source of knowledge, Shabda, is another source of method. This Shabda, Anuman cannot replace Shabda method. Radhesham Prabhu says in his classes that Anuman is like a method of using Anuman to is to understand the presence of the Supreme Lord is like looking at shadow and trying to understand his form of the person, whether he is stout, lanky, how his nose, face complexion, by looking at the shadow. So Anuman has its scope. We cannot establish that Supreme Lord has his abode, Goloka Vrindavan, is a bluish color with a flute. All these cannot be understood by only all this can be understood only by Shabda, not with logical analysis. Lakshanair Anumabakaihi. By using observable symptoms, one can understand sense of soul, super soul, by logic also. That is at the conclusion of this verse. So Sukadeva Goswami concludes to Parishit Maharaj in verse 36. Tasvat sarvatmana rajan harihi sarvatra sarvada srotavyah kititavyascha smartavyo bhagavan runam. Tasmat, therefore, means there is something already been stated which is giving conclusion here. So Tasmat is for two reasons. Example of Brahma, Supreme Lord, who reviewed 3 times. That is number 1. Trying to advise us which is the highest path. And the other reason is, we'll come to that actually. So here it is mentioned, Harihi sarvatra sarvada srotavyah kirtitavyasta smartavyo bhagavan runam. Sarvada at all times, sarvatra at all places, sarvatmana with all of one's body, mind and soul, srotavyah kirtitavyascha smartavyo bhagavan runam. One should hear, chant, remember Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why? Because these are the limbs of sadhana bhakti actually, which is very known to all of us, which are established to be the topmost process to be followed. Therefore, Tasmat word is being used. Sarvatmana means also means with full concentration. Half the mind thinking about bhakti and half I have to do my prescribed duties, otherwise I may incur sin. This situation of mind, this faith should, when our faith splits, it should not split basically. Guna karma, karmadi anavrutam, right? Sorry, jnana karmadi anavrutam. That's what we hear from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So we should not be covered by jnana or karma, because otherwise it will split. Our faith will split. Sarvatmana is what is mentioned here. Sarvada. All other paths cannot be practiced. The second word, all other paths cannot be practiced at all times, because when our heart is when one's heart is completely purified, he need not perform Nishkama Karma Yoga. And after one achieves impersonal liberation, no one continues Jnana Yoga. Same with Ashtanga Yoga also. After he graduates to the stage of Bhakti, he is no longer needed to perform Yama, Niyama, etc. So, in fact, he destroys his facilities after he achieves his goal. You see, the yogi, after he achieves his liberation, his senses gets destroyed also. He cannot perform his Ashtanga Yoga even if he wants to. So, all these other paths cannot be practiced by everyone at all times. That is a proof. Whereas we say, to practice bhakti, such material disqualifications, no disqualifications are there. Anyone can practice bhakti, because there is no sadhya sadhana bheda during the stage of practice or in the stage of perfection. The limbs of bhakti are the same in all phases, advanced or even in the neophyte phase. The limbs of bhakti remain the same and they don't change. Therefore, can be performed at all times by everyone at all circumstances. Sarvatmana, without any split allegiance between two different paths. All your faith concentrating on full on the bhakti. Srotavya kirtitavyascha smartavyo bhagavan runam. Like that, Sukadeva Goswami concludes this presentation here. Srila Prabhupada writes in his purport, though bhakti is ekanga or anekanga, Ashtanga has 8 limbs actually, Ashtanga Yoga, whereas bhakti has 9 limbs. So bhakti and Ashtanga Yoga is in one sense not much difference, right? It might look like. Here you have 8 stages, there are 9. Here he says, no, bhakti is not like Ashtanga Yoga, because there are 8 stages in bhakti, and these are all 9 stages in bhakti, and these are all 9 possible ways one could perfect his bhakti. That's what is the difference. In Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he discusses section where bhakti can be performed with only one limb, also ekanga or anekanga. He gives example of Sukadeva Goswami by perfecting the stage of Kirtanam, Parikshit by Shravanam, Shravanam, Prahlad by Smaranam, Ambarish by Anekanga, perfected his stage by performing all parts, right? Save Manas Krishna Padaravindayo, Vachamchi Vaikunta Gunanavana, and so on. He has perfected by Anekanga practice. Bhakti is Eka and Anekanga both. But it starts with hearing. Prabhupada says, hearing is the most important limb. Therefore, to hear and glorify Supreme Lord is the special duty of a humankind. If one gives this up, then one naturally takes up to hearing all kinds of rubbish. Therefore, it is necessary to hear from Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. One who has heard perfectly about the Supreme Lord can glorify about the Supreme Lord. For this, there is no restriction of time, place, sarvatra, sarvada. Finally, in the final last verse of this chapter, I apologize for the delay, devotees. Sukadeva Goswami mentions that if one takes up to the such practice of devotional service, which is characterized by hearing, chanting, and remembering, what he stands to gain? What is the benefit of such devotional service? In verse is mentioned in the last verse. Pibantiye bhagavatatmana satam kathamrutam shravana puteshu sambhrutam punanti te vishaya vidhushitashayam vrajanti tacharana saroruhantikam. Pibantiye, those who drink kathamrutam, sweet nectarian pastime Krishna Katha, Bhagavata Atmana Satam, to his most dear Supreme Personality of Godhead for his devotees, Shravana Puteshu Sambhrutam, using the cup of his ears. Pibanti, those who drink, Punanti te Vishaya Vishudhitashayam. The heart, that heart which is contaminated by Vishaya, Punanti, by hearing Krishna Katha, their heart becomes cleansed. Vrajanti tacharana saroruhantika, eventually attain the lotus feet of the Lord for service. So here Punanti te Vishaya Vishudhitashayam refers to Klesha Agni. 6 benefits of bhakti are mentioned in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Klesha Agni, Subhata, Moksha Laghuta Krut. There are 6 such benefits, starting with Klesha Agni, ending with Sri Krishna Akarshani, which is attraction to Sri Krishna. Vrajanti tacharana saroruhantikam. That's what it means actually, Sri Krishna Akarshani. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes that the creeper of Bhakti Lata sprouts with 2 leaves, little leaves, right? They are actually compared to when we do Bhakti, Kleshagni, Subhada. Those are the first 2 symptoms, benefits that we see. Then flower starts coming up compared to Sudurlabha and Moksha Laghuta Krut. And that means when a fruit also comes, when it further grows, that is actually the real result. Sandrana, we don't have to understand, I'm just mentioning. Sandrananda Visheshatma and Sri Krishna Kashnartha, nothing but fruits and prema. Ultimately, one wants fruit only, right? But then one may ask, if ultimately one's ultimate goal is prema, why these Kleshagni, Subhada things are, mentioned? Auspicious results, Subhada means, right? Why all these kinds of happiness of, different, results like happiness, material satisfaction were given in the results of bhakti? If our ultimate goal is to attain prema, why all these results are given? Is, for example, if we are enrolled into any college that says you got to enroll your kid when he's in kindergarten, all the way for 25 years he has to study here. We don't give any certificates in between. If he's not frustrated, he continues his education, we are going to give him final certificate after he finishes, qualifies all exams till PhD. So at the end, he will give PhD degree to him. So it is very difficult. Nobody will be able to enroll into such colleges, right? So what happens is, in order to, for practical point perspective, actually in bhakti, these intermediate results are given where devotee constantly establishes his faith along with his journey towards further progress. That is why it is all these 6 benefits were given in the endeavor of bhakti also. Though he doesn't, though a devotee doesn't seek all these, he no longer performs basically he seeks. If he seeks, he becomes like if a devotee expects something out of bhakti, he becomes like the principle of anyabhilashita shunyam, no material motivation. That principle gets broken, right? But when it comes on its own record, one cannot deny that, because it gives relief. Undeniably, it gives relief and pleasure also. So nice prasadam is made, pleasure is there. We cannot deny that. If at night mosquitoes don't trouble us, we get a nice sleep. We cannot deny that. Because Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj used to go to public toilet and he used to chant there. When we get nice environment, to sit and chant, it is appreciation actually. We cannot imitate Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. So these things are there. So Kleshagni Shubhada are, these are all real benefits of bhakti. And Kunti Maharani prayers, she also mentions, right? Kleshagni, all these things were mentioned in the Kunti Rani's prayers also. We can please go through the verses of Kunti Rani prayers. You will, there is a verse called Bhavishye Kalishyamanam Avidya Kama Karma Bhihi. There it is mentioned by Kunti Rani Maharani. These are wonderful verses to contemplate on. Where that is what is described as that's why basically in this last verse Sukadev Goswami concludes by establishing the superiority of bhakti over other paths of liberation, mentioning the benefits starting with Kleshagni and ending with Sri Krishna Akarshani. So that is today's conclusion, dear devotees. If once you get time, please read the last two verses, verse number 36 and 37. Please read those purports. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Sundaracala Prabhu. A wonderful class. Yeah, let's offer obeisances. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Our obeisance to all the devotees of the Lord. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kupasindubhyevacha paditana pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.